When you were a kid, you were saying you were able to look at your dad or your uncle and you could really perceive them and understand them and know them.
Yeah.
When you looked around at the people in the org and you trusted them, do you think there was a misperception there, or were you?
Well, I tell you, I got to be honest, is that the more I got in, the stupider I got. That's as I get out, that's my perception. The less, I mean, Christ, you don't even ask questions. I mean, that's what I was trying to remember the other day, that I was trying to say that I had forgotten. Like this thing, I got into, they made me as commissioner of CCHR. I'm talking to Tory. And the
CCHR is?
Because Citizens Commission on Human Rights is a way to try and destroy psychiatry and psychology. And I was like, fine, I don't give a shit. And so, you know, they put my name on their stationery. Fine, it got me out of an ethics cycle or something. So I said, okay. And, but I would go, and I always had questions, you know, because I would, you know, even L. Ron Hubbard, you know, he would always call the psychs, and he would rail about them and how terrible they are, and they're the sole course of destruction. But he would never, I kept saying, you know, his own technology says that's a generalization, the psychs. Who? Psychs on the whole track. That means all psychiatrists for billions of years in the history of theta. You know, it's like, it's so general, and that would be that's a characteristic of a suppressive person, is one who speaks in generalities. And another one is somebody, a person who has overts, which are sins or crimes committed, is somebody who's, you know, antagonistic or angry. And he seemed very antagonistic and angry about psychs. So I was thinking he must have, you know, overts on him, and he's speaking about him in generalities. But the thing about, I was thinking about that I went over to CCHR and got tours ad infinitum by the directors, this woman, Jan Eastgate, and I would ask questions, and she'd write me up in ethics chits and shit, and I said, fine, yeah, I got the question, I don't fucking know. But I would say, if you want me to represent Scientology's viewpoint, and if you go to their museum, it's all the psychs are bad, the psychs are bad, this is a bad thing, and Hitler, and they're responsible for child pornography and rape, and it's all the psychs. And I say, okay, that's their viewpoint. I say, but if I'm going to get into a discussion, you know, if you want to prepare me to be a spokesman for this shit, I got to know the other side. So, and I kept asking, can you give me the other side? And they won't give it to you. And every time I would push it, I'd be like, honey, there's no way to get into the argument. They, you know, they're not, if it's all this is true, there wouldn't be anything. I got to know their viewpoint. How am I going to win the argument? You know what I mean? And they wouldn't give me the viewpoint. And it was like, and then they started to write me up because I'm doubting. I'm not saying I'm doubting or nothing. I'm just waiting for the data, which is this whole big thing about learning how to think correctly is this other course called the Data Series. And basically you have to get all the data. They won't give you any fucking data on certain things. And especially about this. There's nothing written in all the tomes of Scientology about psychiatry. Nothing other than the psychs are responsible for all your sexual problems because they implanted you as a thetan 10 years ago. And I realized that on my research of OT10. Oh, well, then it must be true because LRH says it's so. I mean, it's really, you see how at a certain point you get conned. And I was saying, where's the fucking data? I'd say to everybody. And they'd show you, and nobody's allowed to tell you anything. So they pull out a reference. They always pull out this fucking reference called pain and sex. And there's like, he's talking about pain and sex are these things that are really just dogging people and bothering them. And it's a really difficult thing that we're trying to help you with in Scientology. And basically, there's maybe 2 sentences in there where LRH says, through my research on the whole track of OT something or other, I just discovered that this is all because of psychs. And that's the reference they tell you to prove that the fucking Hitler and rape is a thing. And I'm like, honey, that doesn't quite handle it, you know, but they don't get it.
Now, I look at this as an outsider, and to me, and I don't have a vast knowledge of this, but it seems like the psychiatric field sprung forth in the 1800s, or not, you know, thousands of years ago or millions of years ago. How are there psychs on the whole track?
Because
if there weren't psychs?
No, well, because now the latest, these are the evil people. These are the evil beings, actually. These are the evil beings. And they've been around. They, you know, like you hear about Xenu and all that shit. Xenu was a psych. You got it?
So he just wasn't a practicing psychiatrist.
No, he was practicing Xenuism. You got it? Gotcha. Now they're called psychs. So you better beware.
I remember one time I visited.
Right? Fuck me.
One time I visited the Celebrity Center, and it just walked in late at night, and looked around and said, "Well, what goes on in here?"
Right.
And they woke up the projectionist to show me the orientation.
Oh, nice.
I had my own private screening that night. And they had some poor Sea Org kid, maybe 15, 16 years old, babysitting me in the theater.
Right. Well, you're not allowed to watch the movie alone.
Right. Well, I was.
You're not allowed to do what? Because you get an MU. Like he was watching to make sure you didn't have any lack of mask kind of shit.
And he was making small talk before that, and he was saying, well, you know, you remember the Salem witch trials? Yeah. You know, it was the psychs behind that. Well, I don't think there were psychiatrists back then. And he went, oh, no, not the psychs. I mean the pharmaceutical companies.
Oh, dear goodness.
No, not quite.
See, these are the kids. You just gotta, you know, you dash off a get well soon card, and that's about it. Because it's sad, you know. And you know, this is the interesting thing. And it goes back to you know, to answer further the question of, you know, what did you perceive? What I perceived, and I kind of avoided the question by saying I got stupider. But let me tell you something. These are good people. These are some of the best people you can meet. These are people who really want to help. They're willing to give up their entire life and their own personal ambition to help others. You know, that's a pretty rare, and generally you would say, you know, it's a pretty decent person. That's the thing. And you know, and I would say I'm not a bad person, you know. If I saw me walking around there, I'd say, okay, he's okay, you know.
But when you say you got stupider, how do you think that happened? Well,
in my opinion, again, and I'm only out of Scientology about a year or so, less than a year, officially. But in my opinion, what I've gathered as I wake up. You know, it's a funny thing in Scientology, you feel as though you're waking up to the truth, the reality, or what really is. But what you're doing is waking up to the reality of Scientology, which is that, not the reality, which is the agreed upon universe of what is. And basically, in my opinion, the best thing you can be is yourself. And that's who you are. And that, you know, there's degrees to which you can actually become yourself. And that's probably what the whole spiritual interest is. For me, I don't really know. But what Scientology, the trick of it is, it makes you feel as though you're sold that you're actually becoming yourself. But what you're actually becoming is, my name's Jason Beghe. I was becoming Jason Beghe, the Scientologist, rather than just, not even Jason Beghe, but me. And the trick is, and you say, how do you fall for this shit? Go back to my first fucking win. Because it's me. It's me. And so there is you. But then it's you are through, I can't explain it, pressure of the group, or this is the thing I'm trying to get. Because I've never been like a guy, well, I got to get a pair of those shoes because everybody's wearing them. It's not been, I've been always, I got to find my own if everybody's wearing those things. But it's like, and maybe that's how I got out to some degree, is that I always try, you know, I mean, I'm not saying I had never, you know, bought a BMW or whatever the fuck people want to do, you know, but it's like, it to me, It gives you a way of thinking that